So welcome to Conversations with Melissa, presented by Renify. So we want to thank our host, Renify. Renify provides practical, research-based advice courses and peer support, focusing on the underlying drivers of our ADHD behavior. We provide a holistic program that serves to help you thrive with ADHD, not in spite of it. Visit Renify, RENAF as in Frank, I.com to learn more about what we have to offer. And remember to check out our YouTube channel for ADHD resources and information. This is Dr. Shandi Fuller, also known as Doctor for the People. Dr. Shandi attended medical school at Howard University in Washington, D.C. She continued her education, obtaining a Master's of Public Health degree at UC Berkeley, and has gotten additional training in trauma-informed care and ADHD. I feel like you're modeling something important.
Right, yeah, and they're not like completely separate either. You know, there's a lot of overlap. A lot of what I do with the ADHD, I kind of got my footing with the advocacy because I feel like a big part of ADHD is advocacy, overcoming misconceptions, you know, and bias and all of that kind of stuff.
When you're diagnosed as an adult, it's not like when you're in school and you're a kid and they're looking, oh, do you have some auditory processing or what else is happening with this kid? So as an adult, if you don't think, hey, maybe there's some, you just put all of the stuff under that heading. What do you help people with?
Yeah, so I help people find their voice and express their voice. I say that I pass the mic to those who feel like they're powerless or don't have a seat at the table so that they can speak for themselves. And I feel like a lot of times, especially for women and people of color, and especially women of color, that even when we are at the table or in the rooms, our voices aren't necessarily valued or heard. And a lot of times that can cause you to kind of go inwards or not speak up or not be authentic to yourself, all of those things. And, you know, and just kind of shy away. And kind of like lose yourself, you know. So what I do is that I help, you know, empower people, particularly women and people of color, to regain their voice and just, you know, show up and not shrink, you know, but to show up as their authentic selves in whatever space that they're in.
How do you nourish the person to continue to speak for themselves?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I focus on. One of them is imposter syndrome. And so like imposter syndrome basically is that voice in you that's saying that you're an imposter, you know, you're not good enough. People are going to find out not only that you're not good enough, but that other people are going to find out that you're not really who you say you are, you know. And the other piece I focus on is like microaggressions, because I feel like a lot of imposter syndrome is increased because of microaggressions, like those really not direct insults, you know, that we experience from today. Like you were saying, the polite shutting down, you know, saying things like you're so emotional or you're so angry or, you know, all those things that you hear on a day-to-day. So that when when it is time, or if you do get a chance to speak, you may not be as confident, you know, or you may not really tell like your true authentic self. And so I work on, you know, changing that with, you know, affirmations, looking at the root of that, working through all of those things, discussing, you know, how you don't want to contribute to microaggressions, and also how you can respond to microaggressions when they happen. all of those things.
Could you give us an example of a microaggression?
So some of the things I've heard is like, which some of them sound like compliments, but they really aren't. So like, oh, you speak so intelligently, when they wouldn't say that to someone else, like, oh, how did you learn to speak like that? And it's like, well, I don't even know how to answer that. It's like, what does that mean? Or let's see, you're pretty for a Black girl, which is like, okay.
Those things where it's backhanded, where it gives with one hand and takes with the other, for sure.
Right.
I love the example you gave about emotion, right? Oh, so now I can't speak impassionedly about any topics in this room.
Right. Yeah. And it's just all to like, well, some of it is just said because people really have no idea what they're saying, and some of it is to just kind of shut you down, like you stop being so emotional, or like, kind of like know your place, or, usually that's towards like women, because we're impossible to be logical, right? So it's like, if we have any emotion or passion, then we're being like too emotional about something,
That emotional thing that takes you down a notch. So now you don't feel like you can self-express. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's some ways that people convey tuck it in. That's my personal slang for that. And Rick put in the chat this, he once had a woman of color, after she got comfortable, say, I didn't know how open and honest we could be in this conversation. Right. Because you need to be guarded. Okay, I'm going to just wait here and see if it's really a safe space or if it's not.
Yeah, that's so important too, like creating safe spaces. And so when I talk to like organizations, that's what I focus on, is like creating a real safe space. And because if you're always coming to an environment and you feel either judged or not, like you don't belong, then you're not going to give your best self, you're not going to be able to. So it's in the best interest of, people like employers, or whatever, people in power of that situation, to create a safe space, but in order to do that, we have to be aware of what we're saying to people and how it affects people.
I was hoping maybe we could talk more about imposter syndrome, where it comes up in treatment.
Where it comes up with ADHD, because there's a lot of like misconceptions, I think, around ADHD. And then there's a lot of like, with that, blaming and shaming that comes along right behind that. And so if you have ADHD and you already feel like you don't belong or fit in, and then you have other people, with their own like views about that, ADHD isn't real, or that you're just lazy, or you name it, and can be very vocal and even sometimes very mean about it, then you can internalize that. So like imposter syndrome is all about like internalizing those stories that you hear, and like the negative stories that you hear about yourself, and believing it, so anything that's learned can be unlearned. Anything that's taught can be untaught. So just because, you may have those negative thoughts about yourself, you can start replacing those with positive and more affirming things. So I think, I think it has a huge role with ADHD, and can be like a limiting factor in what you think that you can achieve for yourself.
We have thoughts when other people reflect back to us what they see or notice about us. We could take on those opinions, right? Maybe they're a little bit more, not only positive, but, someone who's not in here and hasn't heard all the messages you've heard and is just looking at you anew can give you fresher, more useful feedback. So being around people who get you get one sort of feedback when you're in one universe. Hey, that person's odd, right? That person's a goofball. And then you hang around, oh, like let's say you go to Mensa and you're like, everybody here is a goofball and no one's calling me that. They just think it's cool that I know all this about Star Trek or whatever thing I geek out about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Kind of being like with your finding your group, right. Exactly. It can be really encouraging. So being with someone who gets you. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you can control your thoughts, then it's so powerful. I mean, it really is. And I think that's like a lot of like what we've been talking about with the imposter syndrome, with, being your own advocate and all of that stuff. It starts with yourself, and your thoughts. Not everyone is comfortable with expressing their needs or even knowing what their needs and their wants are. So there comes to a point of, getting you to that place where you're comfortable, you know what you want, and you're comfortable expressing that. But then on the other end is, the medical system. So, and doctors, nurse practitioners, whoever, they have to recognize your autonomy. But at some point, they make the final say. And so I like to work on both ends, and someone had put like implicit bias in the chat, I think. So that is a huge role that is played in the healthcare systems, just the bias and the systemic bias and systemic racism that happens. That's not always talked about. It hadn't been talked about until just recently. So it has to be kind of a both and, like the individual being able to advocate for themselves, but that's not enough in order if you want to make like big changes in healthcare. It has to be on both sides. Yeah.
I had this as a quote, advocacy is not enough. And that was it. And you had said something about accountability, change, and education. So
yes.